Margaret Hayes clutched the modest bouquet of daisies closer to her worn cardigan as she walked through the cemetery gates. Thursday mornings had become her ritual, a quiet time before the world fully awakened. When the morning mist still clung to the grass and the birds sang their gentlest songs. She was 62 now, with silver threads weaving through her blonde hair, which she still pulled back in a simple bun. Her clothes were clean but faded, mended in places only she could see. Life had not been generous to Margaret, but it had taught her the value of small acts of kindness. The grave she sought stood beneath an old oak tree, marked by a simple gray headstone that read, Eliza Chase. Margaret had never known Eliza in life. She'd simply noticed, years ago, that no one ever came to visit this particular resting place. While other graves overflowed with elaborate arrangements, Eliza's remained bare, forgotten. That had troubled Margaret's heart. Everyone deserved to be remembered, she thought. Everyone deserved flowers. So she began bringing whatever blooms she could afford, or sometimes, when money was especially tight, wildflowers picked from the roadside. Daisies were Eliza's favorites now, Margaret had decided. Simple, cheerful, enduring. This particular morning, as Margaret knelt to arrange her flowers in the small vase she'd placed there, she heard footsteps approaching behind her. She turned to see a well-dressed man in his late 60s, with distinguished silver hair and a dark overcoat that spoke of means Margaret had never known. He carried a little girl, perhaps 4 years old, with blonde pigtails and a pink dress. The child held a single pink rose. The man stopped when he saw Margaret, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice catching slightly. "That's my wife's grave, too." Margaret stood slowly, confused. "I'm sorry. I don't understand." "Eliza," he said quietly, gesturing to the headstone. "She was my wife. This is our granddaughter, Sophie." Margaret felt her face flush. "Oh, I didn't mean to intrude. No one ever came, and I thought—" "Please," the man said, his voice gentle now. "Don't apologize. I'm Robert Chase. May I ask your name?" "Margaret Hayes." Robert set Sophie down, and the little girl carefully placed her rose next to Margaret's daisies. Then Robert did something Margaret hadn't expected. His eyes filled with tears. "For 5 years," he said, "I've wondered who left these flowers. I come here on Thursdays, but always in the afternoon after my board meetings. Each time there would be fresh flowers, and I couldn't understand it. I thought perhaps Eliza had a friend I didn't know about." Margaret shook her head. "I never knew her. I couldn't bear to see her forgotten." Robert was quiet for a long moment, looking at this woman in her threadbare cardigan with her grocery store daisies. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "After Eliza died, I threw myself into my work. I built my company into something she would have been proud of, or so I told myself. But the truth is, I was running from the grief. I only made time to visit once a week, and even then, just briefly." He paused, wiping his eyes. "You, a stranger, showed my wife more consistent love than I did. You came every week, regardless of weather, regardless of anything, and brought her flowers. Not because you had to, not because of memory or obligation, but because of pure kindness." Margaret felt tears on her own cheeks now. She deserved to be remembered. "Yes," Robert said softly. "She did. And you've done that. When I failed to." Little Sophie tugged on Margaret's cardigan. "Do you miss Grandma too?" Margaret knelt down to the child's level, her heart breaking and mending all at once. "I never met her, sweetheart, but I think I would have liked her very much. She was nice," Sophie said solemnly. "Daddy says I have her eyes." "Your daddy is right," Margaret said gently. "You have beautiful eyes." Robert helped Margaret to her feet. "Please, would you join us? Sophie and I were going to tell Grandma about her week. It seems only right that you should be here too." And so the three of them stood together before Eliza's grave, the wealthy CEO, the poor woman, and the small child, and took turns sharing stories. Robert told Eliza about Sophie's first day of preschool. Sophie told about her new puppy. And Margaret, feeling suddenly welcome, shared how the daisies in her garden had finally bloomed after years of trying. When they finished, Robert turned to Margaret. "Would you allow me to take you to coffee?" There's something I'd like to discuss. Over warm cups at a nearby cafe, Robert explained. I've been looking for a way to honor Eliza's memory. She always believed in helping others, especially women who needed support. I want to establish a foundation in her name, but I've realized I need someone who truly understands her spirit to help guide it. Margaret stirred her coffee slowly. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. I'd like you to help run it, Robert said simply. Not because I feel obligated, but because in 5 years of bringing flowers to a stranger's grave, you've shown more of what Eliza valued than anyone I know. You understand what it means to give without expecting anything in return. Margaret was speechless. Finally, she said, Robert, I don't have any experience with foundations or charity work. I barely finished high school. I've cleaned houses my whole life. And that, Robert said gently, is exactly why you're perfect. You understand the people we'll be helping. You understand dignity and kindness. The rest, we can figure out together. Sophie climbed into Margaret's lap, uninvited, leaning against her chest with the casual trust of childhood. I like you, she declared. Margaret wrapped her arms around the little girl, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, the sense of being needed, of belonging somewhere. She looked at Robert, this man who had everything she didn't, yet who was looking at her with such respect and gratitude. I would be honored, she said quietly. No, Robert said, his voice breaking again. The honor is mine. In the months that followed, Margaret learned that life could change in unexpected ways. The foundation flourished, helping dozens of women find their footing after hardship. Robert became a dear friend, and Sophie adopted Margaret as her honorary grandmother. But every Thursday morning, Margaret still woke early. And whether rain or shine, she and Sophie would walk to the cemetery together, carrying daisies and roses to visit Eliza's grave, because some kindnesses, Margaret had learned, were too precious to ever abandon. And sometimes, in giving love freely to a stranger, we find we've been given a family we never knew we needed. Eliza Chase had been forgotten by the world, but not by Margaret. And in remembering her, Margaret herself had finally been seen. That, Margaret would often think as she grew older, was the true gift, not the foundation or the friendship or even the security she'd found. It was the simple truth that kindness, freely given, returns to us in ways we could never imagine, and that every soul, remembered or forgotten, wealthy or poor, deserves flowers.